You know, you would think by now that the criminals of the world would have learned not to go after Batman, but a handful of assassins have decided that it's a good idea. So who are these guys that are stupid enough to attack Batman? Okay, so this is some smoke and aces type stuff. And this initially picks up in Robinson Park. And you have these two guys who are basically meeting out in the park, which is pretty common for the most part. You ever been to like Washington Square Park, for example, in New York? This happens all the time. And so the conversation is clearly a nefarious one, right? When this box is opened by this old man, the other guy says, the design, of course, but the weight, the feel of the thing. And the old man just says, the feel is everything. And so he explains what's going on here, right? A synthetic ivory of my own invention, grown with the density of steel, yet the physical properties of coal, textured, yes, the better to contain and deliver the poison, which I also invented. And so he says, normally, I do not do this, Mr. Jeffries, but my client paid extra for me to relay to you a message from her in your dying moments. No one runs forever. And the guy just dies due to his exposure to the poison, and the old man walks away. Right? The second person, this takes place at the Neapolitan in the presidential suite. And this one's not nearly as complex. It's just this guy who's apparently in witness protection and he seems to have something to do with the mob, right? He's just sitting out on a balcony smoking a cigarette. And this guy is just like laying in wait with what looks like one of the dopest daggers I've ever seen in my life. So clearly he kills this guy. At that point, we switch over to Vicki Vale and her news program because yes, Vicki Vale still exists in Batman comics. You almost never see her because her and Bruce aren't banging anymore, but she's there with the luchador. And honestly, anybody who's familiar with the luchador mythos, I want to know if this is correct because I've never really known a whole lot about it. The only thing I know about luchadors is what I remember from like WCW back in the day. But what this guy says, right, King Panther, he says, you see, Miss Vale, the mask is more than a symbol of our persona. It is the luchador soul born on the outside. To be unmasked in defeat is the destruction of self, of ego, and of identity. It is the only way to kill a luchador. The stakes could not be higher. And so, of course, Vicki asks him, she says, you're speaking of your showcase match at the top of this year's grand gala. And he says, correct. And forgive my dire tone on the eve of the occasion, such as Gotham City's beloved Met Gala, but no opponent in the world is more villainous than the diabolical Signor Sueno. And he says he is a violent obscenity unleashed on the world of men as punishment by the good Lord God at his most capricious for sins he cannot possibly comprehend. It is the greatest failing of my career that I have not put Sir Sueno down in the street like a rabid dog for his crimes against mankind. And so at that point, Vicki asks, but you're King Panther, the suplex Superman, inventor, philanthropist, award-winning filmmaker, husband, father, teacher, and friend to children everywhere. You've won more than 1,200 of your 1,340 recorded matches. And what does King Panther say? Miss Vale, I would give all those things up to bring this monster to justice until King Panther defeats Sir Sueno at the conclusion of the gala and removes his mask to reveal this beast's true face to the world. No one in Gotham City is safe. No one, right? So that's where Sir Sueno is seemingly one of the assassins. At that point, you switch over to the Monarch Theater, and this is particularly dope. And I love the way that this assassin works, right? Because the reporter's like, oh, we're celebrating the 100th anniversary of the Monarch Theater that hosts Gotham's own Alice Foss for the premiere of her newest film, right? Which has been mired in controversy with accusations of predatory behavior that swirl around power producer Milo Birnbaum of Millimax Studios. So we all know who this is. We all know who this guy is an allegory for. But the reporter continues on, right? As tonight, all eyes once again return to the silver screen of the historic Monarch Theater to see which drama will be more compelling, the one on screen or off screen. And this assassin, Vector, she unleashes two scorpions onto these folks that kills them both, right? Just kills them both on the spot, which is probably one of the most genius things I've ever seen. And then we switch over to a guy in a blimp, right? Literally a Zeppelin, which is pretty amazing. And this guy just says, "My darling, as magical as this last week has been spent in your charming bed and equally charming company, I think we both know how this must end. I can take my leave now if you wish, or we can prolong our goodbye a little while until we arrive in Gotham Harbor. The choice is entirely up to you, my love." And she doesn't answer, right? So like he knocks on the door. He's like, "Darling," right? Like, "Come now, don't be sad. No reason to favor the bitter over the sweet when we can still have a few hours to ourselves." But when he opens the door, there's a bomb inside and the whole thing detonates, blows the whole thing to pieces. And that's when we learn about Spider Black. Now, if you notice, because at this point we switch back to Batman, Damian, and Verity. We'll talk about Verity here in a second. If you notice, we only went over 5 assassins. Looks like there's 6. And we'll talk about the 6th one here in a little bit because that kind of ropes around to the ending. Well, keep in mind, earlier in the Batman comic, right, in the Batman comic from Matt Fraction, we saw a woman named Lady Oyo. I think is how you pronounce her name, O-J-O, but I don't know the exact seemingly Japanese pronunciation or if it's even Japanese at all. We saw her and she was teased as being part of what seemed to be a larger organization of assassins. She didn't really give us a whole lot to go on, right? That's the 6th person that we see. But lest we forget, she is alive. She's not dead, right? She's still out there somewhere. So that's why we say 6 assassins. Now, we just get to see who the other 5 are. But let's talk about what's going on with Verity, right? She's the new butler, the replacement for Alfred. We got a peek at her at the ending of the last issue. She literally just showed up on the doorstep of Bruce Wayne, right? But she basically told him, "I'm your new butler and I'm here to replace Alfred." This is where we get the explanation. She's a part of an organization called the Society of the Midnight Key, and she is related to Alfred Pennyworth. In fact, that's her name, Verity Pennyworth. Now, the kicker about all this is what ends up happening is Bruce Wayne talks to the mental projection that he has of Alfred, because that's one of the things that's going on in the Batman comics at the moment, is that yes, Alfred's dead. He's been dead since the Tom King run when Damian and the Bat family were warned by Bane not to enter Gotham, and Damian did it anyway. And so Bane killed Alfred in front of Damian, which Damian's had a grudge against Bane ever since, which really just pissed off Damian to no end, as you can imagine, because Alfred in a lot of ways, I mean, let's be honest here, Alfred in a lot of ways was the father that Damian didn't have in Bruce, because Bruce tried his best, but I mean, you know, it's Bruce. I mean, he's never really been like the father type guy, right? Certainly not in the way that Alfred was. And so in Bruce's conversation with his mental projection of Alfred, they kind of talk about how everything checks out, right? The paperwork, her credentials, she even let Bruce run a DNA swab just to make sure that her DNA matches the DNA of Alfred, that they're actually descended from the same bloodline. And so the question's asked by Bruce, "How did I not know about your great niece?" And Alfred's like, "Well, I mean, you did in fact read my final wishes, right? My last will and testament that told you about my plans and everything that gets transferred. Like everything was in order." And Bruce is like, "I mean, it's on my desk, you know, like I was gonna get around to it." So Alfred told him that this was going to happen, but Bruce is Bruce and just never got around to reading it like he was supposed to, right? And that's kind of the funny thing. This is one of the elements that I love, this little exchange here where Bruce is like, "I was getting to them," right? This is classic Matt Fraction writing. Right? And so at that point, Bruce just kind of says, "Look, the reason why I never got around to it is because it would have been too much like saying goodbye." Right? And that's really one of the saddest things, is that Bruce hasn't been able to really bring himself to accept the fact that Alfred is gone. Hence the reason why this mental projection even exists in the first place. Bruce just doesn't move on. And so at that point, he's talking to Alfred and asks, "The Society of the Midnight Key." And Alfred says, "It's all in the paperwork, Master Bruce. As long as there have been men and women such as yourself, there have been men and women such as myself at their side. We built the society to train our successors. Verity is brilliant, predictive, adaptive, brave, and through silk or skin, her stitch work is finer than anything you could imagine. She was born for this, Master Bruce." So we're almost kind of talking about like a Kingsman type organization, except it's a whole organization of essentially butlers. I don't know that I would address them as servants, right? But basically people who work alongside folks like Bruce. Now, how far reaching this is, we don't know, because one of the things to keep in mind is that Bruce is Batman is fairly unique within the world of DC Comics, right? I mean, there are certainly individuals who don't have powers that are like facing off against evildoers that exist out there. You find them all over the damn place. But in terms of like the ultra rich billionaire playboys who have like an Alfred Pennyworth of their own, yeah, that's not very common. So I'm very excited to see exactly what the Society of the Midnight Key, what it's all about and how far reaching it goes, right? But again, the conversation continues on and Alfred says, I would have never endangered your mission by not creating a contingency plan for my absence, with or without the luxury of saying goodbye. And so at that point, Bruce is just like, Alfred, you know I trust you implicitly, but like replacing you, I mean, like I'm suspicious enough, right? So good luck convincing that one, right? Damian Wayne is more suspicious than me. But then like, when they look out into the living room and Damian's hanging out with Verity, the dude's having like the most fun ever, right? So like clearly any suspicions he had of her are completely gone, right? They're like two peas in a pod at this point. But that's the idea behind Verity, right? She is part of this whole organization that exists out there. This is why I love Matt Fraction writing. He did this with Immortal Iron Fist, for example, the introduction of Orson Randall, the tournament of the capital cities of heaven and all that kind of stuff. I mean, there are all these things that he did, right, in expanding the Iron Fist mythos. He's doing that here with Batman. So the saddest part about all of this is that when he leaves the title, DC's probably gonna undo it all, right? Just be aware. But what ends up happening here is that Batman and Damian and Verity have taken notice of what's going on here with these assassins and whatnot. And Batman says, new arrivals in Gotham, all in the last 72 hours. And so he says, Damian, analysis, Miss Pennyworth, take notes. And so Damian, in looking at this all, and this is one of the cool things, Matt Fraction builds on the work of Grant Morrison, right? Where Bruce is constantly training his son on how to become a more prodigious detective, because honestly, Damian doesn't really need any training on how to become a killer or how to fight anybody. He's already great at that. But Damian says, professional killers, highly skilled, very picky about their clientele and their victims. They work in the straight world. Their targets are in the straight world. They're non-meta and unenhanced, non-psychotic. Their only true pathology is their tradecraft. They leave scents, not signatures. They're independent, no league backing, no guild associations. They have near zero operational footprints. Worse than lone wolves, these people are ghosts. But that's why I say there is a sixth that was not shown to us, right? If you look at this shot here, right? If you look in the bottom left-hand corner, that person has not been shown to us. We don't know who they are. We don't know what they're capable of or how they kill. But that's what makes these assassins so dope, right? They are quite literally ghosts. They do their own thing, but what makes them so dangerous, right? That very statement by Damian, non-meta, non-enhanced, non-psychotic, their only true pathology is their tradecraft. They are the living embodiment of that scene with Christopher Walken from Man on Fire, right? Creasy is an artist. His art is death, and he's about to paint his masterpiece. It's an amazing line. It's just one of the dopest lines from any movie ever, and the movie was fantastic. You guys need to see it if you haven't already. But that's what makes these guys so deadly, right? They are fully dedicated to this. And so in the face of running over all of this, Damian asks the question, did I miss anything? And so they're all just kind of looking at the screen, and Damian's like, why are they all here now? Well, clearly they're here to go after Bruce, right? Because that's when the image of like Bruce Wayne pops up. And Damian's just like, well, you are a beloved figure, Bruce, right? And so Bruce is like, go to school, Damian. I love that little bit of an exchange, right? But Verity, kind of learning all this in real time, understand she is much sharper than she looks. Yes, she's taking notes, but she has a bigger hand in this than you think she does, right? I won't say what that means. We'll talk about that here in a minute. But she just kind of says, quite a remarkable young man, sir, right? And Bruce is just kind of like, you know, he's growing on me, which I hope so. Damian's his kid. You would think he would take a liking to him at some point. And so at that point, you switch over to the Beacon Hotel, right on the west side with an elevator going up, right? And one of the guys just says lobby, right? And he's joined by what basically appears to be like a bellhop, right? When the old man's in there, that is when the assassin who killed the guy in witness protection, right? That just had the dagger in his hand, is actually the bellhop, right? He's in disguise. But of course, the old man with the poison gas gasses the other guy. And then like the two of them start attacking one another. And in that moment, Bruce comes smashing in, right? Batman comes smashing into the elevator window and basically goes to take both of these guys out. The old man just like pops the capsules on 2 poisons. Batman punches this guy, throws the poisons out of the elevator. The other dude jumps at Batman. Batman attacks them, literally throws him into the roof of the elevator and is like, knock it off. And like that, both of these guys are taken out. And he just says, hold still, right? He gasses the one dude to knock him unconscious, which doesn't really work because he goes and slashes at Batman with a dagger. So Batman just clocks this guy and knocks him unconscious. And just like that, both dudes are done. Like Batman's literally just beating the hell out of this guy in an elevator. And so you have like all these people on the first floor who were like waiting for the elevator to arrive. One of the guys is about to piss his pants. The door opens up and Batman's just standing there with 2 bodies and is like, take the next one. The elevator's trashed. It's like the most Batman moment ever. You guys see why I love Matt Fraction's writing. He's incredible. Matt Fraction's one of the greatest writers of our time, right? This guy is absolutely awesome. We should really cover Sex Criminals, right? It's a really good story that Matt Fraction's behind. You should 100% check it out. But what you do at that point is you switch over to Minotaur. Now, a bit of a refresher here. Keep in mind, this guy has seized control of the criminal underworld within Gotham and started running it like a business. Instead of everybody being for themselves, they all work together, right? They form an organization called Taurus, right? That was the whole idea behind it. What he ends up doing here is he calls a guy named Tezuki-san. Now keep in mind, Tezuki-san is one of the guys who runs or is involved in the criminal enterprises of Gotham. And what Minotaur had done as a show of force when he brought all these guys together, right? The heads of the families, is he brought their families and then killed their families right in front of them, just as a show of force. The guy did it to make a point, right? And so at that moment, that pissed off Penguin. And so Penguin has been plotting the death of Minotaur ever since. And that's why this conversation unfolds the way that it does. Because when he calls up Tezuki-san, he says, some boogeyman has been slicing their way through all the sword boys in all of Little Tokyo. One ran to the Gotham City Police Department hoping they were in the rat protecting business. I would like your permission to give the rat a Kamihara smile, so all of his little buddies know what happens when rats attempt to talk. And that is when Tezuki just says, we drive the same car. Did you know that? Right? And that's where Minotaur is like, is this some kind of a euphemism? But Tezuki says, we drive the same car, and I heard the strangest rattle from my car's engine tonight. A rattle from deep inside. I believe it to be unsafe. I would avoid driving your own until it is properly serviced. Goodbye, and hangs up the phone. Now, this is a message, right? Keep in mind that when the Penguin called together all the other criminal heads, that Tezuki was one of them. And that's where he proposed they kill the Minotaur and take things back to the way they were, right? Just getting revenge on what it is that he did to their families. That's why he says what he says. When he says a rattle from deep inside, he's basically saying, you have a guy who's part of your criminal enterprise with power that wants to destroy you, that literally wants to kill you. Be on your guard. That's what he's saying, right? He's snitching. He's snitching on Penguin indirectly, but he's snitching on Penguin nonetheless. And given the nature of Oswald, I mean, let's be honest with ourselves, right? As capable as he is, he can be very sloppy. It won't be that hard for Minotaur to figure out who this guy is. And so what ends up happening is that Minotaur sends out fake versions of himself, right? Just a guy wearing his helmet. They get into the car explodes. And Minotaur looks down and just says, well, it was fun while it lasted. And so at that point, you switch back over to the 2 guys that Batman has, right? And so at that point, Damian's just kind of like, so they're just here now. And Bruce is like, look, I'm not crazy about it either, but we've been cut off from any medical venue for medical care or legal restraint. Because keep in mind, the other subplot going on here is that Vandal Savage is the commissioner of the Gotham City Police Department and Poison Ivy's mayor. And Vandal Savage, with Poison Ivy's approval, has waged a one-man war on Bruce. He's literally using the entirety of the city of Gotham's police department against Batman. So Batman cannot show up to any hospital or anything looking for any kind of aid. But more so than that, what he's kind of talking about here specifically is like, these guys are trained assassins. You can't just take assassins into a hospital, right? They're gonna start asking for ID and they're gonna have to fill out paperwork and just any number of complications for people who are in this line of work. And so Damian's like, so you abducted them, restrained them, medically incapacitated them, and brought them to our home? And Batman's just kind of like, Batman and Robin have always functioned within certain shifting gray zones of morality and ethics, right? Like, the spirit of the law is not the letter, right? Quasi-legal is not, in fact, legal. So that's just kind of like Bruce Wayne beating around the bush and just being like, look, man, this is what happens when you're in our line of work, right? That's just the way that it goes. I mean, it's not as though what we do as Batman and Robin is entirely legal, man. You know, so like, there is some legitimacy to the criticism of what we do. But I just kind of love the fact that Matt Fraction finally acknowledges that. Like, I love that idea, right? And so at that point, Bruce is just kind of like, I've always known the final criminal that I bring to justice will be Batman himself. I hope you're all right with that, Miss Pennyworth. And she's like, I'm fine with it. I mean, because honestly, she could find work anywhere. She's like, look, I'm fine with it. Mr. Wayne, now, hold still because you squirmed like a child. So the fact that she's chastising him, right, like Alfred, it makes me think of like Michael Caine when he's like, when you sew yourself up, you really do make a mess, right? And so that's where Damian's like, it feels unlikely, right? These two converging on each other. How did a pair of lone wolves find themselves in the same hotel, in the same elevator, at the same time? The likelihood of that is astronomical, considering the fact that these guys are most likely aware of the other's existence, even if on some level, and the fact that they're lone wolves by nature and they've never ran into each other before in the midst of what was basically a contract killing would indicate that they're very good at avoiding one another, even if they've been sent after the same contract. And so that's where Verity says, that would be me, Master Damian. And that's why I say she has more of a hand in this than you think. She says, your analysis of the situation made me believe none of these assassins knew they were involved in a competitive contract scenario. Using a cutout identity that I established on what's effectively the dark web, I initiated contact with each of them and corrected that oversight. I mean, really, 5 killers against 1 is hardly fair, is it? And so at that point, they're like, you can stay. Now, this is where I bring up the idea of the 6th assassin. And I told you guys a long time ago, right, that what Matt Fraction will do is Matt Fraction will tease a moment. He'll give us like a moment, a scenario in a comic. And then what he'll do is he'll bring that moment back, right? He'll come back in with that particular moment later on. And the way this happens comes by way of the Joker, right? Because we saw that moment when the Joker was being experimented on by Dr. Annika Zeller, right? The idea was to basically make him sane. When you switch over to the Lower West Side of Arkham Towers, that Joker's just there in his tank, and he asked the question, right, hello, who's there? Because keep in mind, he communicates through a computer system, essentially. And that's where a person just says, guess. And you don't see who it is. You don't even see them in the reflection of the Joker's eyes. But he seems to recognize them because he says, this is a surprise. Are you actually here? Are you in my head? Am I possibly dreaming? But that's where the voice cuts him off and says, I'm here. That's all that matters. And I'm not going anywhere. No matter what you see, no matter what you hear, I'm not going anywhere. And that's where the Joker just says, that's a relief. And I'll be sure to tell Dr. Zeller when I let her know that you dropped in. You realize, of course, I must tell her you stopped by. And that's where he just asks, like, hello, right? Because nobody answers. And he just says, well, and then just says, ha, ha, ha. So there's one of 2 possibilities here. And I'm very curious to see what you guys think about it, because look at the scene, right? Look at the floor. It's red tiles. Now, in Batman number 7, what happened when Batman went to go see the Joker under the permission of Dr. Zeller? She told him, stay on the green tiles. If you step on the red tiles, it'll administer a medical grade electric shock. Literally, it'll put you in the hospital, right? So the fact that there are no green tiles here mean that whoever it was that visited the Joker was able to get in and avoid touching the tiles at all, which seems very unlikely given how secure the room is, even for someone like Batman, because seemingly he didn't even have the ability to break in. The other possibility here is that Joker's talking to himself, that Joker is potentially splitting off into a personality. I don't know the answer to that question, and I'm very excited to find out. But let me know what you guys think down in the comment section. Thank you all for watching, and I will catch you all later. Peace.